About. Hi, I hope you're doing well today. Please let me know if there's anything I need to know about to make this experience better for you. Uh, Today, we're going to be talking about economics of aging. We'll be doing that in the next 2 or 3 sessions. But we're just going to start off talking about some basic concepts like uh, social class, socioeconomic status, and poverty. Before we talk about this content specifically, I wanted to go ahead and introduce to you the idea of the retirement planning assignment that's going to be due next week. It's a fairly large assignment, due 40 points, and these are the instructions, and it's actually going to be taking about 4 slides to cover them. But basically, you're going to be making a retirement plan for yourself, and it's going to include 4 different parts. The first part, uh, you'll need to talk about where you're going to live and why you're going to live there. Now, I'm not talking about where you want to live when you graduate from college, but rather where do you want to live when you retire? And that may be a very different kind of place. The second part is just think about, so how are you going to spend your time after you retire? Are you going to travel to see the world or see family members? Are you going to try to keep working, or what are your plans for then? The third part is a little bit more detailed and will require some more work. I want you to figure out how much money you're going to need after you retire in looking at on an annual basis. But think about having all these things that are listed here: housing, emergency fund, food and groceries, all those kinds of things. And again, base those on real numbers and real circumstances. The last part is to figure out, so where are you going to get your money from to pay for the things that you're going to be needing when you're in retirement? And these are the different areas that people usually get their income from: savings, Social Security, pension, and as we'll be talking about later, more and more people are working after retirement, and some people have some other sources of income as well. So think about how much are you going to need for what, and then where's that money going to come from? As you do this assignment, these are several really helpful tools. The first one is from an extension service, something I forgot, Michigan State, I think it is, not sure. The others are government sites that are related to retirement. So again, some excellent sources that will be very helpful for you as you do this assignment and as you're looking way ahead toward retirement. So as I said, we want to talk about social stratification and class. Uh, it's, to me, unfortunate that we feel like we have to sort people into different kinds of groups. And stratification refers to ranking people based on their social positions according to their share of social rewards. And here I'm quoting Harris again, and I referred to her book several times. So when we put people into different levels or different stratifications, we talk about or use these 3 different criteria: wealth, power, and prestige. Those are not necessarily go hand in hand. They're usually, if you have one, you're more likely to have the other, but not necessarily. For example, you might have someone who has a lot of wealth, but not much prestige because they may be a bank robber, or in some other way they're not looked upon with admiration from society, but still have a lot of money. Power is the same kind of thing, and you can have maybe a good deal of political power, for example, and not necessarily have a lot of wealth. And prestige, again, what people think about you, how they look up to you. Again, that's something that's usually related to wealth and power, but it's certainly not the same thing. So when we talk about class, social class, those are things that go into it. But as you can see, there's not an easy way to just put people in those categories. It's just kind of hit or miss kind of proposition. Now, when we put these people into these ranks, we have three broad categories that we usually talk about. We talk about upper class, middle class, and lower class. And then we divide those up. We have upper upper and middle upper and lower upper and upper middle and so forth into just all kinds of different possibilities of the way we want to rank people, unfortunately. Uh, Another way of looking at where people stand in society is using socioeconomic status. And this is a little bit more concrete way to measure it. Again, it's hard to measure things like prestige and power and so forth. So this is something that researchers especially can use to put people in the categories of socioeconomic status based on what kind of job they have, how much education they have, and how much income they have. Again, looking back, quoting from Harris again, she makes several big comments and some general overview kinds of things about the importance of social class. And real broadly, again, she says social class has, quote, far reaching consequences that penetrate every aspect of a person's daily life and social interaction. She goes on and says, few aspects of life have more effect on the way we think and behave. And then she says that the impact of social class can be seen in different kinds of outcomes that people have later in life. For example, someone who is 80 years old and has a high level of education, has a lot of money in the bank, those kinds of things, is going to have a very different kind of experience from someone who may be 80 years of age, but yet may be in poverty, may be not very much education, and those sorts of things. So I really like this analogy when we think in terms of these important ideas of wealth and income, because they're not the same thing. We often think of somebody with a lot of income as being someone that's wealthy, but that's not necessarily the case. So, for example, using this analogy here of a bathtub, income is like the faucet that you turn on and the water that comes into the bathtub. And expenses are where the drain is and the water that goes out of the bathtub. But if you want to accumulate wealth, that's like the amount of water in the bathtub. So basically, to accumulate wealth, you have to have more coming in than you have going out. And again, it's easier to do that if you have more income. But there are a lot of people with a high degree of income who don't necessarily have much wealth. You may have seen every once in a while, maybe a professional athlete who has to leave the game, and maybe within a year or two, you find that they've been robbing a bank or something because they don't have any wealth. They're broke. So again, income and wealth are not necessarily the same things. And just to say it all over again, to accumulate wealth, you have to have more income coming in. Here we go. So one of your readings is an article by Abramson that talks about disparities in outcomes for people who are wealthy. And basically and it's really an excellent article. Please read it. And we're going to have another, I think, 3 more slides to look at these ideas here. But basically it says what we've been talking about is that people in later life can have very different kinds of experiences that are largely related to things like education, income, and wealth. And one of the things, it's not really discussed specifically in this article, but we're going to kind of look at these 3 different aspects. Sometimes we hear the term double jeopardy, and Harris has talked about this idea of triple jeopardy, of those who are old, who are also poor, and those who are also from a minority race or ethnicity. And I could add those who are women tend to have 4 strikes against them. And so the challenges that they face may be more difficult than, for example, a younger, wealthy white man. Some of the things that Abramson talks about is a lot of people just are not going to live as long because they have fewer resources. Specifically, he talks about Black Americans with fewer than 12 years of education uh, live 14.2 years less than white men with more education. And there's a big gap as well for highly educated white women and less educated black women. And the gap between those groups has been getting wider over time. But this chart from the same article looks at some of those differences. Life expectancy at birth based on years of education at when someone is 25 years of age, or how much education they have at age 25. And we look again at uh, the more education, the line on the bottom. Again, the more education you have, likely you're going to live longer. Um, and this looks at, again, black males who have higher education. So a big jump in their life expectancy. But you see when you compare different ethnic groups and sex that there's a lot of variation that takes place in those groups there. So, looking at that idea of triple jeopardy, this slide points out several things in Cawthorn that referring to here on this slide is the link to that reading is down here at the bottom of the page. Uh, but again, looking at the fact women had a higher poverty rate than men in old age, women being 75 and older, 3 times as likely to be living in poverty as men in the same age. And among married women, they're likely to outlive their spouse, which means they'll have a reduction in income when their spouse dies. So, looking at, again, difference in ethnicity, um, and this looks specifically at some of the differences with African American, Hispanic, and Asian Americans, and some of the differences in wealth in particular, uh, based on, as a result of, or related to ethnicity there. And something else that Abramson doesn't really talk about, but there are extra challenges in rural areas. For one thing, you have fewer jobs available. You have younger people leaving the area to find jobs in other places. And again, several other factors that make it sometimes challenging for older people to survive in rural areas. And I didn't realize it, but that must be the end of my slides. Uh, I'll be getting back to you with some more later. Good luck to you. Let me know any questions that you might have.